Hi, I'm Malika Bilal in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, thousands of foreign pregnant women arrive in the U.S. for the sole purpose of giving birth on American soil. It's called birth tourism, and it's not illegal. In fact, it's a booming business with so-called maternity hotels popping up. Our colleagues at AJ Plus explain.
It's not against the law to come to the United States to have your child born a U.S. citizen, but it is against the law to lie about it during the visa application process and when you arrive in the United States and you're questioned by officers with Customs and Border Protection.
Most of the women who come to the U.S. as birth tourists arrive from China and Russia, and growing numbers are from Turkey and Middle Eastern countries. Some of the biggest reasons, they say, for seeking birthright citizenship in the U.S. are, for the mom, better prenatal care and comfortable birth options. For the child, access to better universities later in life, better economic opportunities, stable government, and some even say a healthier environment. So just how many people are involved in birth tourism? Well, the numbers of women who come to the U.S. as maternity tourists are hard to track. Estimates vary from the low end of under 10,000 to more than 36,000 in 2012 by the conservative Center for Immigration Studies. Now, we know you have lots to add to this conversation, so our digital producer, Omar Bazar, is looking out for that live feedback. And what are you seeing?
You know, we're seeing a lot of members in our community are actually very familiar with this subject. We have Wako over here who says there are known Ugandan musicians and politicians who fly to the U.S. for their wives to give birth. And then you have Shoaib over here who says he knows one Pakistani that had his baby in the U.S., his baby's U.S. passport in hand 2 weeks after birth. The third week, the entire family left the U.S. And then you have Sally over here who says, I thought it was dangerous to be pregnant and flying though. Yet several Korean friends tells me they are anchor babies in America as well. Now, of course, that term anchor baby, many consider it to be derogatory, but nonetheless, it's one that is used by many U.S. politicians to refer to people who have their kids in the U.S. for citizenship. These are all going to be things that we talk about in the show, but in the meantime, for those at home, tweet us with the hashtag AJStream, and we'll get to your tweets in the show.
And with us to discuss birth tourism and the debate around it, we're joined by Shika Dalmia, senior analyst at the Reason Foundation and columnist at The Week. Ian Tuttle is a writer and Buckley Fellow at the National Review Institute. Rosanna Mitchell is an attorney and founder of Not in Chino Hills. That's an anti-birth tourism organization. And Richard Chang is a reporter at the Sacramento Bee. Welcome everyone to the stream. Now, Richard, I want to start with you because you've reported on the birth tourism phenomenon in California, specifically in the case of a woman named Jennifer. If you take a look at my screen here, here's that article. In California, birth tourism appears to grow. Richard, tell us how it works.
So basically, you come to the United States when you're 8 months pregnant or when you're close to giving birth. You settle down, you find a hotel, find a relative, you go to the hospital, you give birth, you get your birth certificate, get your U.S. passport, and then 2 weeks later or a month later, you're gone and you go back to your country. That's essentially how it works. So
what was Jennifer's story?
Jennifer, actually, this trend has been going on for a long time. She was born in 1989, and her mother came to New York. She gave birth and pretty quickly went back to Taiwan, where her mom's family is from. And right after that, she went through the same processes like any other Taiwanese-born kid. She went to Taiwanese public schools, learned Mandarin. She didn't learn any English at all until she came to the United States at age 15. And that was because she was getting ready to set up her new life as an American. And when she came to the U.S., she first went to several relatives. They took care of her, and she went to the American public schools. And shortly after, she applied to the University of California, Davis, which is not far from Sacramento, where I'm at right now, and graduated with a degree in communication. Now she's on to bigger and better things. She has a job now.
And Rosanna was shaking her head. Rosanna, you're shaking your head. And I know you also have firsthand experience with this because it's happening or was happening in your neighborhood in California. Tell us
That's correct.
What it meant to you.
That's correct. Well, first of all, I'm shaking my head because this is exactly why a lot of Americans oppose birth tourism. What we have here is essentially the anchor baby who comes back, pays no taxes, and then reaps the benefits at 15 years old. And so clearly taking advantage of the system in the United States. And you have to ask yourself, is that fair? Is that equitable? Is that even moral? Quite frankly, I don't believe it is. They did not pay any taxes. They essentially used a loophole and now are reaping the benefits of low interest student loans, going to a UC Davis school, which is very highly competitive. And now they're competing with people who really are Americans. In my opinion, you're not an American unless you live in America and you have the American dream. This is essentially not the American dream. This is not what we intended when we gave right to citizenship when you're born here.
So,
Sure. But the consultant that I talked with for my story, and he runs a bunch of maternity homes in the Los Angeles area where you are, he actually said that the U.S. government was getting a good deal because essentially you raise the baby in your home country, and then the baby comes back later when they're ready for an education, and they go to a public university, and then they later on they pay taxes to the government. So that's what.
If I can just jump in here.
It's not a good
if I
deal
could just
for
jump
the
in here, a couple
Americans.
of points.
Go ahead, Shika.
Yeah, so a couple of points. You know, the term anchor baby gets bandied around a whole lot, but let's just be clear, first of all, on what anchor baby means. Anchor baby means having a baby in the United States in order to be able to live in the United States, both the baby and the baby's parents or the baby's relatives. This Asian birth tourism is a very, very different phenomenon. Here, the parents actually have the baby over here. They pay the full cost. Occasionally, it runs into something like $50,000. They have the baby over here. They are rich people. They go around designer shops buying Hermes bags, and then they return to their country with the baby. And for the baby to return when the baby is 18 years old, usually 15 is generally unusual. It's usually 18 when they're ready to go to college. And as Richard said, this is actually an enormously good deal for the United States because the most expensive phase of a person's life is when they are babies, when they are children from about, till they're about 18. And the cost of raising a child in the United States is about $300,000. So it saves the US all that investment in the child, and the child comes back as an adult when they are productive citizens. So, either way you look at it, it's a win-win. And, the only thing I would also add over here is we have to look at the reasons they are coming over here. The vast number of Asian birth tourists are from China. And they come over here actually to get around China's one-child policy, because if you have a baby of another nationality, then you can escape the one-child policy. So there is.
So Shika, you've raised a lot of good points. In the meantime, I see Rosanna still shaking your head, so I know she wants to disagree with that. But I want to bring in our community here because people online also have their views. So Omar, what are they telling you?
We received a video comment from Naseem, who's actually from India and who did have a baby here in the United States. Let's listen to what she has to say.
Hi, I'm an Indian citizen. I had my first baby in the United States of America. We had not planned this, but it just happened that we were visiting the US at the time and decided then that it would be a great opportunity for the baby. It would be a boon for his higher education in the future, as the education system in America is one of the best. So I stayed back. I had many relatives there who gave me all the support I needed. I don't know whether this was a wise decision or not. The future will tell.
So we know Naseem came back to actually have another child in the U.S. But when you hear, Rosanna, that the reason is for education, does that not give you hope that if it's people who are here to get education, therefore they're going to be productive members of society?
You know what people are not getting? It's a free e-ticket. It's a free ticket to drain the United States of whatever resources they have by what I understand anchor baby is that is exactly what it is. There is an anchor in the United States that you could come back anytime you want because you had a baby in the United States, and now that baby is an American citizen. Now, let me tell you, there are stories out there in the news that have come out, and I wish every scenario people would just come here and spend all their money, and we're getting all this revenue, but that's not the case. We've got people here who show up at the door at a hospital pregnant, who is coming here for birth tourism purposes, using Medicare to pay for their medical costs. So if that's and that is an actual, it's been verified in the news, and they're mostly happening in East LA area. Excuse me. And I'm sure Chang knows a lot about this. There are people that are milking the system, coming in here, and not paying for their medical care.
And his first name is Richard. I hear you, Rosanna. His first name is Richard. I want to bring in Ian here, though. Hold on one second, Shika and Rosanna. I want to bring in Ian. He's been very quiet. Ian, you're holding back, and I know you have thoughts on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, I think the question of the relationship between birth tourism and anchor babies falls somewhere in the middle between Rosanna and Shikya. And there are a couple of things here. One is the children who are born to birth tourists very frequently, when they come back at 18, Shikya is right about that, when they come back at the age of legal maturity, then they're in the initial stages legally of being able to bring over their family under American family migration policy. And there are a couple of years of sort of a probationary period, and then that opens up completely. So there's that question. The second is one of culture, and that's something I think Rosanna's hinted at, but that we ought to make explicit. A number of people are opposed to birth tourism as well as the anchor baby phenomenon to the extent to which we want to differentiate them, not simply because of economic consequences, which are important, but also because there's a question, I think a very real and important question that Americans grapple with as to what does it mean to be an American? Does someone who is born in the geographic United States but is reared somewhere else in a different culture with a different, potentially a different set of values, with different fidelities, et cetera, when they come back at the age of 18 or whenever, are they Americans in any?
So Ian, what is your answer to that? You posed a good question. What's your answer?
Well, I think it frequently depends. To go to the geography of where some of these people are coming from, a number of the vast majority of Asian birth tourists come from China, but from other countries, for instance, Turkey or Nigeria or Korea, you have these countries that are, not in the case of South Korea, but in some of the others, what you might call sort of second world countries. They're the countries we don't often think about in the sense of they're sort of late or they're sort of middle modern countries in terms of their economics. Okay. They're countries to which Western values have come fairly recently, so they're wrestling with these questions of identity in their own countries. And I'm not at all unsympathetic to parents who are trying to sort of figure out what they want for their children and being drawn to both of those. And I definitely,
I sense that from you, Ian. I also know that you didn't quite answer the question. I want to bring in our community, though, because they have their own comments on this. Go ahead.
So one of the things that Rosanna mentioned was the fact that many people come here and maybe feed off the system, get through this through Medicaid. But we have somebody else here online, Adebayo, who says many of such women pay cash to doctors and hospitals. You'll be shocked how much comes in from tickets and accommodations and baby shopping and so on. Richard, which of these two things happens more often? Are these people bringing in a lot of money with them for this to happen, or are they taking advantage of the system here?
Yes, I mean, the people who are coming in from Asia, from China, from South Korea, from Taiwan, they bring plenty of money. I mean, this is tens of thousands of dollars. And on top of that, they also bring in millions of dollars for investment. They might buy a house in LA. They might open a restaurant. I mean, that happens more often than someone showing up at a hospital just to give a baby without paying a dime. And we also have to put this into perspective, because even though it's being widely reported in the media recently, as of late, it's really not that widespread. Think of all the babies that are born in Asia. You have to have a certain amount of money before you can even think about flying over to the US and paying the expensive healthcare costs here. Right. And plus,
so Richard, you mentioned money. Richard, you mentioned money, and so I want to show all of our guests and our viewers something, and I'll pass this back to you, Rosanna. So these are a few of the sites that people use, these maternity hotels, you can call them, once they get to the U.S. Many of them are in California, near where you are, Rosanna. But if you take a look at my computer here, here are some of the ones people use. This one is from or towards Russian-speaking citizens, babymiami.ru. This next one is Status Med. It's also for Russians, many of whom go to Miami. This last one shows you accommodations. This is for Chinese citizens. You can see some of the lush accommodations that are promised to people. So I want to know the reality, Rosanna, of what these maternity hotels, what these packages are offering people.
And you know what, I have to, it's very difficult for me, honestly, because on a personal level, I was born in Peru, and I came over here through the regular channels, which is basically both my parents came from Peru. My dad had to come down here and leave us for a couple of years, raise enough funds to bring us over legally. And so, but as far as a personal experience, just recently, 3 years ago, and this is an example of how they're taking advantage of the system. In the city of Chino Hills, we had 30 pregnant women living in a residential home, which was converted. It originally was 7 bedrooms, 3 baths, and it was converted to 11 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms. 30 pregnant women basically a hotel in a residential area. They were paying cash, about $30,000 per person in cash. They did this for approximately 8 months. There was no business license. Mr. Wu received $500,000 in cash, took that money and left and went back to China. And did any of that go to the United States? No, not one nickel went to the United States, because everything is done in cash. And that's the problem. And let me tell you, there's been a raid at Irvine where they've raided these birth tourism apartments. There's a reason for that. And they were going to prosecute people there, and we had 3 women that took off before they could even be prosecuted and went to China. We have the lady that was on the plane who waited to be above the United States before she gave birth, got on a plane telling everyone she was 34 weeks or less, when she in fact was 36 weeks, and then gives birth right on the plane. That was a huge issue in the news. There are 2
things that I'm going to jump in here for our audience just to explain. Shika, I will go to you, but 2 things I want to explain for our audience. One is that the prosecutions, you said prosecutions were supposed to happen. They didn't actually happen in that case. Right. And secondly, the case of a Taiwanese citizen on a plane who gave birth mid-air is the one that you're referencing. Shika, I know that as Rosanna was talking, you look like you were dying to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. First, to return to Ian's point about the assimilability of immigrants. Like, let me just say, you know, I come from not even a second world country. I come from a third world country like India. And I came over here completely legally, completely followed all the rules. And, you know, and I've considered myself fairly assimilated. And I think what's great about America is that, you know, we don't count assimilability by the language we speak or geographic attachment. You know, America is an idea, and most people come over here because they like the opportunities and the free enterprise system here in America that, you know, that creates these opportunities, and they are just coming here to take advantage of that, which has been historically the case since this country was started. That's why it's called the land of immigrants. You know, Thomas Jefferson used to, excuse me if I could finish, Rosanna, I'll let you finish. You know, Thomas Jefferson used to worry about people coming from European monarchical countries and whether they will be able to, you know, assimilate to the Republican values, a Republican with a small r. values of America, and we survive pretty well. So this idea of assimilation applies not just to birth tourists, it applies to all tourists, and I think America's example shows that it's doing pretty well. And as for Rosanna's description of these businesses, I mean, let's just separate out the issues over here. There is the issue of whether birthright tourism itself is good or bad, legal or illegal, and whether these businesses are being run in the proper way.
Right.
Now, I can fully believe that these businesses maybe sometimes are not run in the proper way. I can also believe that a lot of residents like Rosanna, who kind of don't like, these foreign-looking people walking around, just basically throwing the book at these people. And now there is a DHS investigation going on. There's a DHS investigation going on. And the facts will come out. But if these businesses...
So, Shika, you raised an allegation. Rosanna refuted that allegation. I want to get our community in here
I'm not
because I want to hear what they have to say as well.
So, there was this housing complex out in California that the Rolling Stones said that was actually operating as a maternity hotel. And we have reviews on it on Yelp that we pulled up a couple of them. We have Thomas here saying, been living here for about 3 months, unacceptable amount of pregnant Asian women here that are obviously part of a scheme. And then you have somebody like Sophia over here says, this is a place, not an apartment complex. It is a Chinese maternity hotel. There are pregnant Chinese women here like roaches. Now, obviously, this is a very ugly way to talk about any community. Ian, I want to throw this your way. Basically, when you hear things like that, it suggests that there might be hostility there beyond just an objection on a policy level. How much of it do you think comes out of xenophobia, and how much of it actually comes out of the fact that people have a legitimate grievance here that they're raising from an economic point of view or taking care of the system or something along those lines?
Look, I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
Omar, who was that question for?
I threw that one to Ian, actually, if we can get
So everyone had an answer, but that question was actually for Ian. So let's get Ian back in here. Ian.
Well, I think it's generally unfair to start from the presumption that there's some sort of xenophobia or racism involved. Again, I think the problem is generally one of identity. This plays into a lot of larger trends, a lot of perception pervasive in America right now about economic opportunity and about whether there is actually opportunity to rise. There's the availability of social mobility, and the question of whether immigration encourages that or impedes that. A lot of when something like a maternity hotel, hospital, however you like, is in your neighborhood, then sort of that question of who is first in line for jobs, etc. The opportunities that are associated that we historically associate with the American capitalist system. Those concerns are very real to you. So I'm sure there's ugliness out there, but again, I incline to think
so
that,
Ian, you raised some questions, and I will say that some of those answers are actually found in the U.S. Constitution, and this is legal according to the 14th Amendment. So I want to show all of our viewers and our guests what that actually looks like. So take a look at this. It's the 14th Amendment, as I mentioned. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So Rosanna, you see that it is legal, but critics, of course, still say that people are abusing the system. Rosanna, I'd venture to say you think that it's abuse?
It's being abused. And let's just for clarifications, I just want to state one thing before I say anything else. My husband is Mexican. My stepkids are half Korean, half Mexican. My daughters are half Peruvian and half Caucasian. So if anybody has any diversity in their family and is open to all races, that would be my family. So I want to clear that up right now. I just want people to understand that Americans, real Americans, and it's like indicated before, it's a cultural issue. You are not an American culturally if you come in here just for 2 weeks and then your parents take you back and then you come back later. I'm sorry, that is absolutely wrong, and it's not the intention, and that's why people are talking about changing the Constitution. I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, I think I can give you some perspective about
Richard, can you give us perspective in about 15 seconds? Because I'm going to wrap up the show.
Absolutely. So basically, this Taiwanese woman that you referenced who gave birth on an airplane, she got a lot of flack for that when she went back to Taiwan.
You're bringing up something that I want all of our audience to know about, so I'm going to bring that up in the post-show where we'll discuss more. They are streamed at aljazeera.com. Welcome back, everyone. We're discussing birth tourism in the United States. We're going to get right back to that discussion with Richard, who I had to very unpolitely, I had to cut you off because we're running out of time. But I want you to start what you were saying. First, I'm going to show this on my laptop because I do want all of our audience to get a sense of what you were saying. This is something that was brought up a little earlier. I think Rosanna brought it up. Woman deported without baby after giving birth mid-flight to the U.S. Taiwanese mother separated from her newborn, and it sparked a discussion about birth tourism. So you were saying, Richard.
Yes, I've been following that news very closely. And in Taiwan, when the mother returned, she had to have a jacket draped over herself because of all the media that congregated. And this is not a phenomenon that people in Taiwan agree with, for the most part. Otherwise, you'd see a lot more babies, because it sort of diminishes the value of Taiwanese citizenship. For whatever reason, rich people have to go to the U.S. and get that blue passport, and so, as a result, basically, I mean, this is not supported by people in Taiwan and mainland China. This is not mainstream. This is seen as a ticket for people who are rich, and sort of like an insurance policy, especially in Taiwan, because they remain under the threat of force by mainland China. And some people believe if your child has an American passport and if mainland China invades, the Marines will come and get you and transport you to the U.S. I mean, that is the belief of some people.
Omar?
So one of the questions that is being raised in our community a lot is the question of whether this can be regulated in any way. We have Isa over here who says maybe making sure the parents are actually residing there, basically looking at whether they have a tourist visa versus a work visa. And then we have Muhammad over here who says, I would say that it should be regulated, but attacking birth tourism via removing birthright citizenship is against American vision. Malika, you kind of see how people feel like some people are abusing the system, but that getting getting rid of this entirely would go against American values. Rosanna, if it was up to you, what kind of modification would you make that would maintain America's vision as a melting pot where everybody from all over the world can come, but without this being abused? What would your reform actually look like?
Right now there is a huge loophole when people apply for visas as a tourist. We need to tighten that up, and we need to penalize people who lie. When they lie and say they're not pregnant and they're pregnant, obviously that's fraud. We need to do some criminal penalties if necessary. We have to do something serious enough, like your passport will be revoked, or you cannot come ever to the United States, so that they don't do something that is absolutely inappropriate. Something has to be done. I am not necessarily in favor of removing the right to citizenship if you're born here, and I'm going to explain to you why. And I think people need to understand the difference. I can be very, very compassionate, for example, when you have an illegal alien coming over the border from Mexico who wants a better way of life. And so they come in here illegally and they work hard. But you know what? They want the American dream. They want that green card. They want that American citizenship, and they want to live here in the United States and be Americans. That is a huge difference between them, who we are compassionate towards, versus some rich person who wants to have maybe an e-ticket just in case. If you don't like your country, come live to the United States. We are open door policy. Come here, pay your taxes, be an American. That's all I'm saying. Why not? Why should the privileged, the rich only, have dual citizenship? That's wrong too. I have to question that. But more importantly, is everyone is abusing the system, and we are financially being drained by people abusing the system.
Shika?
Yeah, this whole idea that we are being financially drained by Asian birth tourism just doesn't make any sense. So I'm not even going to, address that anymore. As to the question of whether we should regulate the laws, let me just put the numbers in perspective over here. 1 million immigrants come to the United States every year. This is at the most, the biggest number that we can, credible number that we can get is this is 30,000 kids. It is not a huge number, folks. Now, I understand that for communities, which are bearing the brunt, are facing, maternity hospitals and what have you, this might seem like a lot, but it is really a negligible part of the problem, and not even a problem given that these people pay for their entire birth costs, they raise their children, like I said previously, and then send them back to the United States. They're really not a drain on American taxpayers. I mean, that, I think whatever else we kind of like, do over here, I think that point should be clear. And to Rosanna's point that why don't they just come over here and live their taxes, I would tell you there are people in, even Ian, I would think, at National Review, who want to clamp down on that completely. They don't like people coming over here and living. America doesn't have an open door policy because for all kinds of reasons.
Do they?
Well, you have to recognize they
I have a question that our team had, and I hear you, Richard. I'm going to go to you in just a second. But Shika, a question that our team had before this meeting, because of course you mentioned taxes, and we were wondering when the babies of birth tourists turn 21, wherever they're working, if they're employed, do they then have to pay U.S. taxes?
Of course. They instantly start paying taxes. I mean, one of the things with having people over here on H-1B visas is, before they get their green card, they actually don't pay any payroll taxes. If you are a citizen, you pay all the taxes right away. So, so this is like, in fact, birth tourism is something of a windfall for the United States, because the costly years of a child's life are spent in another country, and they come over here when they, start paying taxes, they start making an income, they start actually productively contributing to a society. So this notion that they are a drain on America is kind of like not very credible.
Okay, I hear that point.
Undocumented aliens, I mean, there you can raise a question after you look at the numbers, even there, the kids that undocumented aliens have, even they don't pose a drain to the U.S., but Asian birth tourists, no credible person claims that that they cost the United States a whole lot.
Okay, and I want to raise a point that Ian raised a little bit earlier, and I want to elaborate on that point really, because we're talking a lot about Asian birth tourists, but this does happen with other ethnic groups as well. And I want you to take a look at my map. This is something we mentioned a little bit earlier, but this is mapping maternity tourism. So you can see New York, Miami, and California are some of those big hot spots. Here in New York, you have Turkish families to be. In Southern California, that we've talked about, you mainly have Chinese families, and Miami, you have a lot of Russian families who seem to prefer that location. And then you also have Las Vegas and Hawaii as hotspots where some people go to bypass potentially suspicious immigration officials. So Richard, you see this, and you see that it's thousands of expected women who enter the US. Stats are a little bit hard to grasp, but thousands. And yet, the stream reached out to several of those women to ask them to be on this show. And nearly all of them, except for the one that we got the video comment with, and even she obscured her identity, none of them wanted to talk about this on the air. It's a very sensitive topic. Why do you think that is?
Well, even though this whole thing is legal, it's being blown out of proportion by the media and by activists. And they feel that if they come out with their face, they're going to be threatened. And not to mention, like I told you, back in Asia or back in wherever they're from, it's also against public sentiment. People don't want birth tourists. It throws a bad name for Taiwan or for mainland China. So as a result, they don't want to come out. And they're also fearful that maybe if they come out, they might lose their citizenship. I mean, someone's going to take it away or something might happen.
So, Richard, you mentioned the media, and we have people here online who are also weighing in on this. We have Nikos, who says it's almost a tradition to invoke ending birthright citizenship on the GOP. By the way, that's the conservative political party here in the U.S. Presidential Front. Cynical rhetoric, rhetorical posturing, goes on to say it is pandering to nativist constituencies who are fired up over many years by media fear-mongering. Rosanna, do you buy that this is media fear-mongering that created the sentiment, or is this a ground-up genuine sentiment that people are concerned about this, that the politicians are just responding to?
Listen, I live in a sleepy city, and we ended up with 30 pregnant women living in a house that was converted into a hotel for 8 months. We had the sewer or the sewage broke open, and you can imagine it rolled down the hill to a lot of residents in a very upper higher class community. Okay, this was a very real experience for the residents of Chino Hills, which is a very small city of 75,000. Mr. Wu made 500,000 minimal and never paid one nickel of taxes. So I can only go by my personal experience. All these people are saying, no, it's not a financial drain. No, it's not happening, or whatever the case may be. But it was a financial drain to us when we saw that happening, and all the money that went out, which we never saw anything. The police actually did a sting thinking that there was human trafficking going on. And the sad part about the whole thing is the actual hotel, which was converted to a hotel from a house, had holes on the floor, wires sticking out of the window. There was no ventilations for these poor moms. So I have to question, it even became a public health issue. What if any of these moms would have given birth at that particular place? I mean, it was really substandard care. It was so sad, and I believe these owners are taking advantage of these people and essentially charging them all this money and giving substandard care. And it can't be good for the babies or for the mothers.
Rosanna,
so there is a problem here that needs to be dealt with.
There's too little
we're not here to solve.
So everyone wants
problem.
to talk at this point. I knew that would spark the debate. So I actually want that to be our ending question. I want to get your views, everyone's views on that. And we just heard where Rosanna was coming from on that. But that tweet, just to remind you all, from Nikos, asked about whether or not this is just fear-mongering on the political party's part or the media. So your ending thoughts on that, Shika?
I think it has been blown out of all proportions, and it is because it's a hot button issue that plays well politically for Republicans. I mean, I think Tom Tancredo, who your tweeter mentioned, is, one of those people who, basically this issue has been picked up by all the people on the right who don't like immigration. They don't like, and so they are looking for ways to clamp down on immigrants. Now, Rosanna is different. I mean, I'm not, Rosanna, just to be completely clear about that, you're responding to certain, local realities, which are completely well taken, and I can totally understand how it would impose a strain on local resources. But I think that issue can be separated out from the actual immigration issue and the birthright citizenship issue. The local business practices of these, operators of these maternity wards is a different question from the immigration question. So I just want that to be clear.
Okay, Ian, your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, your tweeter sort of conflated these two issues, unfortunately, and the fact is, it's unfair to chalk this up to sort of nativist pandering, in the sense of, if you look at the wider anchor baby phenomenon, you're not talking about 36,000, you're talking about somewhere between 350 and 400,000 annually. The second point that's worth being made is there's legitimate legal debate in this on this question, and we sort of glided over it previously. The 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, on which birthright citizenship is based, says that citizenship is extended to those born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. There's a long history of scholarship combating, resisting the interpretation that exists. So this is very complex. It has both it's politically and legally multifaceted. It's not a threshold issue. It's not threatening the apocalypse, but it plays into a lot of wider cultural and political trends that people on both sides of the issue need to be sensitive to the intricacies of.
Good perspective there, not threatening the apocalypse, from Ian. Richard, I'll get your last thoughts.
I just wanted to emphasize that 3 years ago, when I wrote this story, there was far few information about it. I mean, no one had reported it. And that's what happens when you're in the news. You report on it, someone catches on, and then earlier this year, last year, I mean, there were a lot of raids at the maternity hotels, and I can understand where Rosanna is coming from, and that's just what threw it out into the open.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, the conversation does continue online. I want to thank our guests, Shika Delmia, Ian Tuttle, Rosanna Mitchell, and Richard Chang, and of course our community for all that they had to add to this conversation. You want to wrap us up with a final tweet?
Sure, I'll close you out with a couple of sentiments. We have Ajiro here who says that birth tourism is a win-win situation for both the U.S. and the tourists. After 20 years, those children will go back to the U.S. and serve their country. On the other hand, you have Hind here who says, seems like only wealthy foreigners can afford to come to the U.S. as birth tourists. It's hecka expensive to have babies here.
And looking at the faces of our guests, I know they have more to add to that, so you can get their thoughts online. We'll see you there.